Luis Arráez, a White Sox nemesis, is out of the AL Central, and could it really be the best offseason move for the Southsiders? An MLB Network analyst is bullish on the White Sox to win the division in 2023, and it all comes down to staying healthy. No surprise there. New White Sox manager Pedro Grifol sounds off on the plan for right field, and old friend Nick Madrigal might need to find a new home. Could he come back to a familiar place?
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Sox fans, welcome to Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Sox. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search Locked On White Sox. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon today to get started. Hey, I'm your host, Nick Morosi, a lifelong diehard Chicago White Sox fan, recording this podcast just blocks from the ballpark in beautiful Bridgeport. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Hey, really appreciate you letting me steal some of your time to talk off-season White Sox. Locked On White Sox is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It might be best for Oscar Colas to start in AAA, but he will have every opportunity to state his case for right field. It's a big if, but what if Eloy Jimenez and Luis Robert, the lightning and thunder of the Southsiders, can stay healthy and have career years in 2023? Luis Arráez is out of the AL Central, but the White Sox should not sit back and relax. Hey, welcome back to Locked On White Sox. We are in the off-season mode. We are down to 3 episodes a week. We'll be back to 5 episodes once spring training gets underway, about 3 weeks away. Thank you so much for subscribing to our YouTube channel as we climb to 1,000 subscribers. We're on our way there. So thank you so very much for passing this along to other Sox fans in your life. Just a reminder, Wednesday's episode will be Mailbag Wednesdays. Get any questions, comments, concerns, predictions, worries, whatever it may be, get it into lockedonsox@gmail.com, and we will open up that mailbag on the next episode. Roughly 9 weeks until opening day. Sox, of course, in Houston for that 4-game series to start off the season. Still waiting on that big trade that we heard about at the beginning of the offseason from Rick Hahn, and I'm starting to believe that trade might just not happen. However, other teams in our division were making trades recently, namely the Minnesota Twins. Luis Arráez, who was a member of the Twins from 2019 to 2022, is out of the AL Central. He was traded to the Miami Marlins for essentially starting pitcher Pablo Lopez. So big thorn in our sides. We saw a lot of Luis Arráez. I think a lot of Minnesota Twins fans would say, well, maybe, the Twins go the way Buxton goes, but Buxton has, struggled to stay healthy like so many of our White Sox players. Luis Arráez, a guy that can get on base, gets your hits. He might be on base 3 to 4 times a night. Of course, wore the black hat during that no-hit bid by Dylan Cease. He was the member of the Minnesota Twins to get that lone hit in the 9th inning against Dylan Cease. Tough out, a very tough out. Some people question, well, why not just walk Luis Arráez in that situation? Why did Dylan Cease want to face him? And Again, I want to go back down this road, but I thought Dylan Cease made the right call there. He wanted to Dylan Cease is a competitor. He wanted a challenge, and Luis Arráez gave him everything he could handle. And Luis Arráez, he's a professional hitter, so that's what the Marlins get. In return, the Minnesota Twins get Pablo Lopez. I don't know if they know or anybody knows right now what he is. What they hope he can be is maybe a 2, maybe a 3. The Minnesota Twins need starting pitching. So I would much rather see Pablo Lopez maybe 4, maybe 5 times a year than seeing Luis Arráez, come up to bat multiple times in a game, multiple times in a year. I'd rather see it as a fan, get him out of the AL Central. However, good pitching beats good hitting. And if Pablo Lopez figures something out, we're going to see him on the schedule. And it almost like when Verlander was locked in for the Detroit Tigers, or Scherzer, or the multitude of, Cleveland Guardians, Cleveland Indian pitchers over the years that just were extremely difficult. You could almost just say, you know what, this is not going to be our night. We just knew how that was going to go. So pitching can be dangerous, of course, to face, but happy to see Arraez, out of the AL Central. Wondering if this is how the Minnesota Twins or other teams in the Central felt when Jose Abreu walked and went to the Houston Astros. This isn't the first time. Me as a White Sox fan, you probably remember all of the different names that have left the AL Central, and we just kind of wiped our brow and said, thank goodness we don't have to see a Whit Merrifield anymore, or a Nelson Cruz, or Lindor, or as I mentioned, Verlander, Scherzer, and all of those other Cleveland pitchers. Arraez had a 327 batting average with 69 hits, 1 home run, 19 RBIs, and 26 runs scored in 58 games against the White Sox in his career. 327 batting average. So is this really just, addition by subtraction for the White Sox? A lot of folks have come out and said, you know what? This is actually the biggest offseason move by the White Sox. The fact that Arraez has been traded to the Miami Marlins. I think when your team, when you're in a division, and in a division rival, takes a step back the way it seems like the Minnesota Twins are, you would hope, in this situation, the White Sox would double down and are aggressive, to get their own doing done, to get better by their own means, not by what some other team does. Make things really sting for the rest of the division, right? Try to win instead of just not lose. And with 3 weeks away from the start of spring training, it just seems like that big trade I talked about at the beginning of this episode that was hinted by Rick Hahn at the beginning of the offseason might not happen. Hopefully, in my opinion, that big trade does not involve former Chicago White Sox second baseman Nick Madrigal. Nick Madrigal, I think, is looking for a new home. I don't think it's going to be he might find some moments with the Chicago Cubs, but it's not going to be in a starting role, as they have filled their needs in other ways. I think Madrigal's wondering it. I think a lot of Chicago Cubs fans are wondering it. Other baseball analysts are wondering it. Bob Nightingale spoke about the situation recently, and of course tied it in to the fact that, well, the White Sox need a second baseman, and hinted maybe there could be a deal between the North Siders and the South Siders. Personally, I don't want to see it. We did what we did. We got rid of Madrigal in 2020. He wasn't going to help us that year, and in the sample size that I saw, I'm fine with that trade, and I don't need to see a reunion. For a lot of different reasons, the White Sox went in the direction that they went when they drafted Nick Madrigal, and I think quickly pivoted when that trade was made. And I think they don't need to look backwards. I think you got to look forwards, even though it stings, and we're still looking for a veteran second baseman. I personally, I hope it's not a reunion with Nick Madrigal. It sure looks like Romy Gonzalez, Lenyn Sosa, maybe Luis Garcia for second base. This was from a recent Scott Merkin article. The second base competition falls between Romy Gonzalez and Lenyn Sosa. Veteran Luis Garcia will also be in the mix for playing time, but general manager Rick Hahn already has made it clear that Garcia's value is playing all over the field. Now, for Romy Gonzalez, he's 26 years old. He had 105 at-bats last season. Lenyn Sosa, 22 years old, really just a cup of coffee with the White Sox last year, had 35 at-bats last year with Southsiders. So the White Sox, believe it or not, are being picked as a favorite to win the AL Central. I'm going to tell you why the Sox could be so very dangerous in 2023. More on that in a moment. We are really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the number one sports book in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. New customers join today to get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just sign up at fanduel.com/locked on. FanDuel has all your favorite bets from the money line to point spreads to player props. Plus, you can even combine your bets with a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. I was taking a look at some of the games for this coming weekend, the AFC-NFC Championship. You got the over-under for the Cincy KC game at 47.5. I like the over, and the over-under for the San Fran Philly game is 45.5. I like the under. We'll talk some White Sox odds in a moment. It's all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use, so football fans don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at fanduel.com/locked on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So I mentioned some of those FanDuel odds in regards to the White Sox, and this is just fresh on their site as of January 23rd. White Sox World Series odds at plus 2,500 to win the AL pennant, plus 1,400. Right now, the Yankees and the Astros are best at plus 300. Now, the Sox are in a tie with the Cleveland Guardians as the favorites to win the AL Central, according to FanDuel, with the odds at plus 160. You got the AL Cy Young race. Carlos Rodon and Dylan Cease are neck and neck at plus 1,000. And then talking about the AL MVP, Luis Robert is plus 5,000. That is your best for a White Sox player. We're going to talk Luis Robert. We're going to talk Eloy Jimenez. Jon Morosi was talking all things AL Central and the Chicago White Sox recently on the MLB Network as he picked the Sox to win the Central. This was a few days ago on Friday, January 20th. His AL Central predictions were made before the Arraez deal. Morosi had the White Sox, then Cleveland, Minnesota, Detroit, then Kansas City. And what Morosi was saying is what we all as White Sox fans have been pitched since the beginning of this offseason. It's all about health. Morosi said health was the biggest problems for the White Sox in 2022. I would say it was also a lack of preparedness, players playing out of position. There seemed to just be a lack of urgency, horrible defense, crazy lineups, on and on. But health, for sure, was a huge problem. Morosi said, look, they just need to have a healthy season. And I had an episode back in late December right here on Locked On White Sox that really featured a what if we're to follow this narrative from Rick Hahn and the front office of, hey, we are banking on return to accustomed levels, but also to our core being healthy I think the Sox could be very dangerous. I know it's a big if, but if guys can just get back to having normal seasons, Morosi said, not career years, but just normal seasons, the White Sox, could be dangerous. It is a huge if. We know better as White Sox fans. We just don't have the sample sizes from guys like Jimenez and Robert and, the Grandal stuff and Moncada and our pitching woes. We know better, but we're in that hope stage. At least I'm trying to be. I'm trying to be optimistic right now after what we had last year, leading into spring training until I'm proven wrong, until there is, another injury. And I'm just hoping that does not happen. But I think Morosi was onto something. He also talked about Kendall Graveman moving into the closer role. And I've kind of thought about Ronaldo Lopez in that spot. Graveman had 6 saves for the White Sox in 2022. He has 16 career saves since breaking into the big leagues in 2014. Ronaldo Lopez, on the other hand, has 0 career saves since breaking into the league in 2016 with Washington. So that is going to be something that hopefully gets figured out in spring training. It might be closer by committee early on. Speaking of health, here is that what if. I mean, what if your Lightning and Thunder, Eloy Jimenez and Luis Robert play in 135 to 140 games and put up big numbers this season? There was an MLB.com article just recently entitled, "These 8 players need to stay healthy in 2023. It was by Thomas Harrigan. 2 of the 8 players mentioned were Chicago White Sox players, Eloy Jimenez and Luis Robert. For Eloy Jimenez, this is what Harrigan wrote. Baseball's number 3 ranked prospect entering 2019 per MLB Pipeline. Jimenez is 4 years into his career, but still hasn't played a full season. The only year the right-handed slugger didn't spend time on the injured list was the shortened 2020 campaign, and he's missed more games than he's played across the past 2 years, suffering a rupture of his left pectoral tendon in 2021 and a torn hamstring tendon behind his right knee in 2022. When healthy, Jimenez has flashed prolific power potential, averaging 36 homers and 108 RBIs per 162 games while posting a collective 123 OPS plus. If he avoids the IL in 2023, we could see the 26-year-old rank among the AL's home run leaders. And this is Harrigan on Luis Robert. Like his teammate Jimenez, Robert has missed considerable time over the past 2 seasons, going down with a right hip flexor strain in 2021 and battling several ailments last year. Still just 25 years old. He isn't that far removed from his days as one of the top-ranked prospects in the game when he was considered a potential superstar with plus tools across the board. Through a career .289 average with 36 home runs, 26 steals, and 122 OPS plus over 222 games is nothing to sneeze at, Harrigan writes. He hasn't quite met expectations thus far, but that could change in 2023. So my challenge to you, if you really want to do this, it can be frustrating, it can be maddening, but just sit back on one of these cold, late January, maybe early February days. Just sit back and imagine what a season could be like if Jimenez and Robert played in 140 games and had career years. It's a big if, but it warms you a little bit to think that way. Oscar Colas will have his chance to prove he can play right field, but I'm going to tell you why it might be best for him to start the season in AAA. More on that in a moment. So Pedro Grifol, our new Sox manager, opened up recently about the plan for right field. He also talked about the season in general as spring training is approaching. Grifol said the goal, obviously, is to play postseason baseball, but there's a process to this thing, and the process includes high energy. It includes details. Hopefully it includes a White Sox team that plays far better defense. Pedro Grifol said prospect Oscar Colas will have every opportunity to become the White Sox everyday right fielder, according to an interview he did on Inside the Clubhouse on 670 The Score. It was just this past weekend. Colas is the second-rated prospect in the White Sox farm system. He played in the Cuban and Japanese leagues since 2016 through 2017 when he was 17 years old. In the seven games he played in AAA, Colas slashed .387, .424, .645 from the plate across all three divisions. He slashed .314, .371, .524. So Grifol mentioned Gavin Sheets. I know you don't want to hear it, but Gavin Sheets, who played the most games in right field last season, he could be a possible backup. Or a plan B, maybe. Leury Garcia and Jake Marisnick as other options for the job, saying there's going to be some competition there in right field, and Oscar is going to be right in the middle of it. Another idea, despite pushback on his defensive abilities, is continuing to play Eloy Jimenez in the outfield. The ideal situation would place Jimenez in a permanent designated hitter spot. I agree with that. Yet Grifol wants to see Jimenez in right field. This is what Grifol says. I'm really looking forward to seeing Eloy in right field, Grifol said. I'm not talking about seeing him there every day, but I'm talking about maybe seeing him there a day or two a week if possible, and keeping him athletic and keeping him working on the defensive side, because I know that helps on the offensive side as well. I just think it could go the other way too. Maybe something wrong could go out there in right field, and that would hamper his offensive abilities. Namely, he gets stuck in a net or tears a pec trying to do something spring training that he shouldn't. We will see. Here, in my personal opinion, this could be the best scenario for the White Sox. Gavin Sheets absolutely mashes in spring training. Okay. He destroys the ball. His offensive numbers are great. He's locked in. He's figured some things out. And everything he's unlocked during his journey and the stints he had with AAA last season. And, he's had a good off season and he looks very comfortable at the plate, and he's serviceable in right field and he wins that spot in right field. And that means Oscar Colas take some swings in AAA to start the season. Okay. He eases into things. Or here's another scenario, I guess, is Oscar Colas is serviceable in right field during spring training. Okay. But I'm serviceable with the bat in spring training, but plays, some amazing defense. Looks like he really knows what he's doing out there. And we're saying to ourselves, look, I'd rather be solid defensively. The bat will come along. Don't need him to be, crushing the ball and having career numbers. Just that will happen. But love the defense, and that's what the route we're going to go. By committee seems, a little dangerous. Hopefully somebody is the clear winner, or there's a clear plan in place in the direction that the Sox go in. Hitting coordinator Andy Barquette had a lot to say in a recent Athletic article by James Fegan. You might have read this. If you haven't, it's an excellent article. Barquette talked about Benintendi and Oscar Colas. According to Fegan, Barquette thinks it would be helpful if Colas got more than 33 plate appearances he has under his belt at AAA. He's at peace with the idea of it not happening as well. But if you got to put him in the big leagues to help the team win, he said, the coaching staff that's in place there, I trust those guys to help him grow. And I think he could do it if that's the need. So there's no doubt Oscar Colas will struggle, but I just don't want to see him get frustrated. Like if he's not performing, he's letting the team down or something like that. He's going to want to show he belongs. He might be trying to do too much, and that's not needed. And hopefully there are players and coaches ready to deliver that message. Patience, all in due time. Folks, thank you so very much for making this podcast part of your daily routine. You can find the Locked On White Sox podcast absolutely everywhere you find your podcast. We're on Twitter at Locked On Sox. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and get your questions in for Wednesday's mailbag episode, lockedonsox@gmail.com. Thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB Prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up on the next episode, I'll go through that mailbag, your questions, your comments, your concerns, your wondering. He's going to talk a little bit of pitching as well. Talk a little Michael Kopech too. Really appreciate your time, and thanks for giving it to Locked On White Sox. Pass this podcast along to other Sox fans in your life as we gear up for spring training. I'm Nick Morosi, and until next time, go Sox.